beautiful downtown Grand Forks, the proud home of the University of North Dakota. This is the time and place for the Committee of the Whole meeting. We'll begin with roll call, please.
Weigel.
Here.
Osowski. Weber.
Here.
Lunsky. Here. Gavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
And Veen. Veen?
Here.
Yep, we have a quorum.
Very good, thanks. Start with item 2.1, special event, Average Persons Winter Olympics, Half Brothers and Rhombus Guys Class 11 license. Good evening.
Good evening, council members. I'm bringing to you probably our first one of the year. This is a commingling request. We put it under noise variance commingling. It's a winter event brought by Blue Weber from Downtown Development Association, and they are going to be hosting the Average Persons Winter Olympics, and it'll be held in Town Square next to the arena and all the different winter amenities that they're bringing into that space. They've joined together with Half Brothers and Rhombus Guys Brewing so that they can offer beer to those who attend.
Very good. And any questions, comments?
Move approval.
A motion from Mr. Kavami, second from Ms. Lunsky. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2.2, create district for project number 8640, district number 773, to reconstruct South 20th Street from 17th South to 20th Avenue South. Good evening.
Thank you, Vice President Weber and members of the committee. This project consists of reconstructing the existing roadway on South 20th Street from 17th Avenue South to 20th Avenue South. It's the next phase of South 20th Street reconstruction. We did the last phase last year from 24th Avenue to 20th Avenue South. The existing concrete roadway was constructed in 1968 and 1970. It's in very poor condition. The pavement surface is severely cracked, heaved and spalled. This creates poor ride and drainage. The total construction cost for this project is estimated at $1.15 million currently. A portion of the project is to be funded with the city share, and current city policy is to fund 80% cost of reconstruction of classified streets. City share is estimated at $918,000 and will be funded using the Street Infrastructure Fund, 4815, where $936,000 was budgeted for this project in 2023. So it's our staff recommended action that we approve the engineer's report, create special assessment district, and direct engineering department to prepare plans and specs for project number 8640, district number 773.
Very good, thanks. Any questions from Mr. McGuire? Looking for a motion from Mr. Veen, a second from Mr. Weigel. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Mr. Lieberman, item 2.3, create district for project 8573, district number 771, reconstruct Legend Lane, 28th Avenue South.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President Weber and members of the committee. Similar to the last project, this is a reconstruction, a proposed reconstruction of Legend Lane. Legend Lane is a continuation of 12th Avenue South. It runs parallel to Washington Street on the east side. It essentially acts as a frontage road, and this is the southernmost portion of that frontage. This was built in the early 1970s. It's 8 inches of asphalt. It's in very, very poor condition. We're recommending reconstruction with concrete, which is a more long-term durable product. The estimated cost is $530,000. It does qualify for an 80-20 cost share, where the city would pay for $424,000 roughly from Fund 4815, which is budgeted for. The remaining 20% would be special assessed to the benefiting properties. So with that, engineering is requesting approval of the engineer's report, creation of the special assessment district, and direction of engineering to prepare plans and specifications for this project.
Very good, thanks. Questions? Yes.
Maybe one brief question. All of these are still protestable, is that right?
That's correct. The resolution of necessity for paving can be protested per North Dakota Century Code.
Move approval.
Motion for Mr. Vian, second for Mr. Kvamme. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 2.4, plans and specs for project number 8664, 2023 Inlet Protection Service. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you again. Council, you may recall that last year at this time, the City Council approved a similar inlet protection contract. What that was intended to do is provide protective bags in our catch basins only in residential new construction developments. The issue there is to prevent dirt and sedimentation from getting into the stormwater system and meet our compliance requirements with our state MS4 permit. Last year, that was a trial basis. We feel it was a success, and we and Waterworks Department are recommending we continue that this year. We've increased the scope a little bit as far as the frequency of maintenance to ensure we're fully compliant with our MS4 permit, so it's a little more expensive than last year. About $120,000 is the estimated engineer's estimate for this contract. The city does collect a $50 fee per home, so that's more of an administrative fee for processing it. It's not a subsidy of this requirement, but there is a little bit of revenue generated from this. The $120,000 would be paid for from Fund 5400 Stormwater. So with that, engineering is requesting approval of plans and specifications and direction to advertise this for bid.
Any questions to item 2.4? Mr. Kvamme.
I had a question, it might be unrelated, but we had had prior discussions about construction debris and trash kind of blowing around. Is part of that, is there any scope in that as far as inspecting to ensure that we're catching those things as we are checking these more often?
We do inspect for those items, but that's not part of this contract.
Okay.
The issue with this contract is in residential builds, you'll oftentimes have one catch basin that provides drainage for maybe 6 or 7 lots, and those lots could be owned by different builders, et cetera. So it's very difficult to say, well, who's responsible to protect that inlet? So that's why we proposed the city take on that particular responsibility.
And in regards to the prior citizen comments that we had about catching debris, is that, I know that's something that if you see it, the best thing to do is to call 311 or call and report that you're seeing it to the city so that we can go out and note it.
Yep.
And then if that's an issue, we can take care of it with the construction crew.
Yep, between engineering and the inspections department, our inspectors would take care of that.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Move approval.
I have a motion for Mr. Kvamme, second from Ms. Linsky. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of 2.4 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Item 2.5, plans and specs for project number 8572, district number 770, paving 11th Avenue South from 58th Street and 800 feet east from there. Very good.
Thank you, Vice President Weber, members
evening.
of the committee. This project is part of the City of Grand Forks initiative to provide city infrastructure to developed areas. The proposed project would construct 11th Avenue South as a 2-lane concrete urban roadway, starting at South 58th Street to about approximately 650 feet to the east. Currently, the roadway section is a raised gravel section with ditches. This roadway section does have existing storm sewer that will be utilized with the proposed project. The engineer's estimate is $390,000, and it's going to be 100% special assessed to the benefiting properties. City Council has approved the engineer's report and the creation of the special assessment district. So staff is recommending the approval of plans and specifications.
Very good. Is it Mr. Euland?
Yep.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Euland. Any questions on item 2.5?
Move approval.
I have a motion from President Sandy, second from Mr. Vian. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Moon. Item 2.6, plans and specs for project number 8614-15, the 2023 city sidewalks and ADA curb ramps. Mr. Bremer.
I'm Shane, but
Hi, Shane. Sorry, of course. Hi, Shane.
thank you, Vice President Weber and members of the council. These are the annual city sidewalk projects and ADA project. The sidewalk project is used to construct citizen-requested sidewalks and those which have been identified as missing, in disrepair, or unsafe. The ADA ramp project are installed throughout the city, either where they're missing, in disrepair, or unsafe. The ADA ramps are installed throughout the city. Both these projects are throughout the city. Where they are missing or in disrepair, $375,000 have been estimated for these projects. Of that, $300,000 is expected to be special assessed to individual property owners as part of the sidewalk project. Staff would recommend approving plans and specification and direct for advertise for city project 8614 and 8615.
Very good. Thanks, Shane. Any questions or comments?
Move approval.
Have a motion for Mr. Weigel, second for Mr. Veen. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item 2.7, plans and specs for project number 8641, reconstruct South Washington from the south end drainway to 57th Avenue South. Shane.
Thank you. This project will consist of the reconstruct of South Washington in the location as you referred. The current street section is a 25-foot wide raised rural section with no streetlights currently installed. The proposed reconstruction will replace the existing 2-lane rural section roadway with a divided 4-lane highway with storm sewer improvements, streetlights, a signalized intersection, concrete shared use path, and a box culvert. The box culvert is being proposed to be installed at the south end drainway to act as a pedestrian underpass. The proposed location is at the confluence of multiple shared use paths, including the ones that parallel the south end drainway and those along South Washington. It will allow for an alternate way to cross South Washington Street. The intersection of 55th Avenue is being proposed to include traffic signals and also to include turn lanes, mostly in all directions for southbound and northbound traffic. The street pavement for the project is planned in 2 phases. The phases will allow for the continued access into All Seasons Garden Center. Other work of the project will follow a typical timeline. The proposed project is being proposed as a multi-year construction due to the concerns of production and delivery of some of the proposed features, such as the signals and the box culvert. This project will have a final completion date in 2024, with the majority of the work being completed in 23. The current engineer's estimate with 5% contingency is $6.6 million. The project is 100% city funded, and funding will come from 4815 Street and Infrastructure, where a total of $6.3 million has been budgeted. If the low bid exceeds the budget amount, we will request at that time for a budget amendment. Staff would recommend to approve plans and specification and direct engineering department to advertise for bids for City Project 8614. I did too, however, I believe you should have an overview of the project in front of you so you can reference it. I forgot to mention that.
Any questions either about the slide on the frame or other questions? Mr. Veen. Go ahead. Mr. Kvalme, please.
I've received a citizen comment about this. It was really nice to respond to him, instantly with, this is next on the list of things to get addressed. During that last big, storm or snow dump, we had lots of issues with cars in the ditch there. So it's really nice that this is getting done. It's really timely. I'm happy that this is being addressed now. I think that there's a lot of people that were calling for this, so appreciate that this is now being addressed.
Shane, The question I have is, you were stopping short of 62nd. It would, what I was looking at, you kind of do these small little sections at a time, and you got to have the transition. Was there anything in the planning that would have actually extended this project all the way to 62nd?
Currently, I don't believe so. I mean, I guess this project was budgeted to go to 57th Avenue. Actually, it was budgeted to go to 55th Avenue, and we were able to push a little bit farther once we ran the numbers for the project, so, but not that I'm aware of, I guess, unless someone else can speak more on that.
It's more expensive, there's no question about it, to go to further, but it's more cost-effective to not have to end it now and then come back years later and end it again. And I don't know what our future growth is going to be over the next few years. I just wondered if that was considered.
I believe 62nd, or 262nd is in the budget in the near future. Is it 2 years out? Yeah, so it's 2 years out, so I'm not sure.
Does that align with the development that's going on along there?
It does. As Grand Valley develops, it's going to take a beating on those access roads off Washington and off 62nd. So we're just trying to catch up with, the city's been growing south at a pretty fast pace, and keeping Washington developed and making the 4-lane road hasn't quite kept pace. So we're getting as far as we can with the budget we have right now.
Perfect.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
A motion for Mr. Kvamme, second for Mr. Vian. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Shane. Item 2.8, plans and specs for project number 8568, district number 768, reconstruct South 14th Street.
Vice President Weber, members of the committee. This project consists of reconstructing the roadway of South 14th Street from 11th Avenue South to 14th Avenue South, and reconstructing 14th Avenue South from South 14th Street to South Washington Street. In addition to reconstructing the roadway, we'll also be improving some storm sewer there, as well as adding street lighting, improving ADA crossings, and other miscellaneous improvements. This project has been before the council before, back on February 6th, where the council approved the engineer's report, special assessment district, and directed engineering to prepare plans and specifications and advertise for construction bids. Currently, the engineer's estimate for this is at 1.67 million, and the city share for that would be 1.33 million, and there's currently 1.12 million budgeted for this in Fund 4815. If our bids come in above what we have budgeted, we'll request a budget amendment. And with that, I'd like to ask, staff would recommend to approve plans and specifications for this project.
Very good, thanks. Any questions from Mr. Letexier? Motion for Mr. Vian, second for Mr. Kvamme. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thanks. Item 2.9, bid award for project number 8609, the 2023 water main replacement on Gateway Drive from Mill Road to North 20th Street. Mr. Letexier.
This project consists of replacing the water main that is underneath Gateway Drive from North 20th Street to Mill Road. Currently, it's an 8-inch cast iron pipe. We'd be proposing to put in an 8-inch PVC pipe. This project will have some traffic impacts that are undesirable, but it's led to a lot of problems that we've had in previous years with repairs that have needed to take place on there. This project has also previously been to the council on January 3rd, where council approved plans and specifications and directed engineering to advertise for bids. This project was bid on February 2nd. 2 bids were received, with the low bid going to Taggart Contracting at 6% below the engineer's estimate. So with that, engineering would recommend to approve the low bid to Taggart Contracting in the amount of $759,866.
Very good. Mr. Vian.
Yeah, is this, is the water main in the street itself, or is it in the right-of-way?
So the existing water main is, it's close to the joint between the second and third panel from the north, or from the southern curb, and we'll be moving this closer to the southern curb. There's not very much right-of-way on Gateway Drive, so this is the most logical place that we could put it. It's about 2 to 3 feet off of the curb joint to the north.
So will it be open cut then in the street?
There will be, we'll open cut as little as possible, and we'll bore and push the remainder of it.
Okay.
Yeah, very good motion. Mr. Bean, second, Ms. Lunsky. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item 210, plans and specs. Item 210, plans and specs for project number 8529, upgrade controls and drives in flood pump station number 202, 203, and 210. Mr. Lieberman.
Good evening, thank you. As part of the city's flood protection system, it includes 12 flood pump stations that the city owns. This project will replace controls and drives in 3 of those 12 pump stations. They were all constructed roughly 20 years ago, so we're having issues with getting parts, getting technical support for the mechanical equipment in those flood stations. We performed a similar project back in 2018 where 4 other stations had similar work done on them, so this is a continuation of that effort to keep those flood pump stations current and operational. The engineer's estimate is roughly $1.4 million, which will be funded from the Flood Protection Capital Maintenance Fund 4154. This was budgeted for in 2022, and those funds are carried forward into 2023. So with that, engineering requests approval of plans and specifications for City Project 8529.
Questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval.
We have a motion for Mr. Veen, second for Mr. Weigel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 2.11, plans and specs for project number 8549, upgrade to pump station number 184. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you. This project is very similar to the previous. This rehabilitates Storm Pump Station 184, which is located on 6th Avenue North. This is just down the street from the Gateway Walmart. You may have seen it on 6th Avenue there. The city's practice is to rehab these storm pump stations every 15 to 20 years. It's been 20 years since this was rehabbed, so it is due. The rehab will include replacement of controls and drives, a new generator, other new equipment and appurtenances. It's a more thorough rehab than the controls and drives on the previous project. The engineer's estimate is $910,000, which is budgeted for in Stormwater Fund 5400. So with that, engineering is requesting approval of plans and specifications and direction to bid for City Project 8549.
Very
Move
good.
approval.
Have a motion from President Sandy, second from Mr. Kafami. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Again, item 212, and we'll do A, project number 8603.01, 2023 flood fight assistance, project number 8603-03, 2023 flood fight filled sandbags, and project number 8603.02, 2023 flood fight crushed concrete. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you. These 3 contracts are annual preparations we take should we need to fight a flood in spring. The first one provides contractor support as far as manpower and heavy equipment should we need to move material and, for example, raise the levee. The second one provides crushed concrete. That's needed because the city's flood protection system includes 6 miles roughly of paved road, as part of that levee. Should that ever need to be raised, we would use crushed concrete as the material for that. So that's the purpose of that second contract. The third one provides filled sandbags should we need to secure inlets, manholes, et cetera. I recommend on the first one, we had two bidders. Gowan Construction was the low bid at $416,858.50. This is a time and materials contract, so the city has no obligation except for reimbursing a bidder's bond, which is about $3,000, unless we use those services. Then we'd obviously pay for those services.
Very good, thanks. And I read all three of these together. Do you want to take them all three at once, or do we need to vote on them separately? We can do it all at once, so go ahead with the crushed concrete then, if
Okay.
you would.
Crushed concrete, we had two bidders as well. The low bid was by Strata Corporation in the amount of $159,000. Likewise, that's it's a materials contract, so if we use the material, we pay for the material. If we don't, there's no obligation for the city to pay. And likewise, the third contract, we had one bidder, Gowan Construction, in the amount of $52,244 for filled sandbags. Likewise, the city would only be obligated to pay if we actually purchase those materials through this contract. So with that, engineering requests approval of these three contract awards to the low bidders for each.
Very good. Thank you again, Mr. Lieberman. Questions or comments? Yes? We have someone online? Nope. Mr. Vian, please.
What is the latest projection for this spring?
I should have read that report before coming here. It's been very mild. The 50% exceedance value, it was roughly in the 30s feet. I don't recall the exact number, but it's not a significant concern at this point. But it's very early and things could change if we have heavier snowfall.
We have a motion and a second. Motion from Mr. Vian, second from Mr. Kvamme. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Lieberman. 2.13, downtown parking management contract. Ms. Edwardson.
Good evening. Back with downtown parking. Real quick, I'll give an overview of the RFQ process and selection and how we got here tonight. I'll kick it over to Tony with Interstate, who will give a brief presentation, and then I'll bring it back for the budget discussion. So with that, jumping into it, council approved in December a request for qualifications process to look for a third-party manager for our downtown parking system. Due to the extensive growth we've seen downtown, as well as the new intensive use of the hotel, we need to reinvest in our parking system, as well as have a higher level of service for that to operate efficiently. So with that, we went through the request for qualifications. We advertised on the city website, the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, as well as the National Parking Associations. We received 3 qualified submittals and 1 non-qualified. The 3 were national firms or regional at least, so highly qualified firms. We had a really decent turnout. Proposals were scored by the selection committee based on the management plan, the operational plan, improvement plan, and their experience. The committee met on the 31st to interview those 3 submittals and rank them accordingly. And with that, Interstate Parking was the highest ranked out of that process. So quickly, I'll turn it over to Tony to give a brief overview through Zoom for their portion.
Tony or Mr. Schnettler?
Hi, this is Tony.
Okay, take it away, Tony.
Wonderful. Do we have the overview slides available, Andrew, or am I just sharing verbally?
I can share my screen, I think, Andrew.
Tony, do you not have the ability to share your screen?
I do not right now. I can in just about 60 seconds here.
Paul's
I'm
willing to
sorry.
share now, or?
Do you have it, Paul? Sorry to hold everybody up here.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Sorry. I made the assumption they were loaded up for some reason.
We're looking at it now.
Okay. Can you just make that full screen there, Paul?
You tell me.
Okay. So, wonderful. So interstate parking
Actually-
is a,
Yeah, Tony, I'll interrupt you. I've got it on mine. If you can see mine though, that might make mine, makes things a little interesting.
So if you'll stop sharing for a moment, Paul,
All right,
or permanently, actually.
stop share. Hey, Jack. Show me how to stop sharing my screen now.
There we go. And now, Andrea, you can post it for us?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, John, can you post it for us in the back there? We should be able to post it here in a moment and pull it up full screen.
The question is just whether or not Tony's gonna be able to see it.
There we go.
Perfect.
perfect.
All right, Tony.
Wonderful.
let me know.
All right. So, Paul and I are partners in interstate parking. We started the company about 13 years ago. If you want to just advance to the next slide there. Perfect. We have a national presence in about 17 different cities with our nearest regional office located in Fargo, where we have operated Fargo's parking since 2015. Over the past 13 years or so, we've developed a real specialty focus on mid-size municipal parking management. And this opportunity here with the City of Grand Forks is basically a perfect fit for what we specialize in. I can't see the screen for some reason any longer, but that's okay. Oh, there we go. So we operate about 380 locations across the country, about 350 team members, and 13 different municipal partners. Our municipal approach is to create a custom solution for each community that we work with. So there's really no two that are alike. You can see on the screen there examples of the various communities that we work with, all of which are 100% branded and configured based on the community's local needs. Go ahead and do the next one there.
We're looking at your team.
Okay, perfect. So our municipal team, some of you have met Paul, myself on the left, Vanessa, who will actually be managing the City of Grand Forks operation, who's located in Fargo and will be spending time in Grand Forks, just an hour down the road there. And then a couple of other key team members that will be directly involved are the head of our Finance, Audit, and Accounting, John Meck, our Chief Technology Officer, Darren Murray, and Sherry Burns, who coordinates our customer account management throughout North Dakota as well. Next slide. So this RFP kind of has two steps to it. The first is to assume management of certain day-to-day activities, including maintenance, vendor management, managing the existing permitting system for monthly and annual parking contracts, and jumping right into improvement planning for the system as a whole. That will include certain upgrades for the on-street and off-street parking facilities between the two garages, the two surface lots, and the various on-street. Categorically, the improvements sort of encompass a few different key buckets that we like to sort of put things in. One is the wayfinding and branding throughout the system, sort of the interface that all of the residents and consumers will experience the parking system through maintenance and operations, and then also the variety of permitting requirements. If you go ahead and click to the next one.
We have dedicated community parking ambassador.
So initially, we'll have one full-time community parking ambassador, and that individual will be performing certain maintenance, customer service, and some enforcement support, which is currently entirely provided by the police department. And having some support there and additional enforcement activity will provide a lot more consistency and regularity to that function. Over the course of time, as the system evolves, there could be additional ambassadors deployed, but initially we'll be handling it with one full-time person. Go ahead. So the process for implementing and developing the improvements is probably our favorite part of working with new municipal partners. We start by effectively, outlining what the actual goals and objectives are for the Grand Forks parking system. We then put together an operational analysis of that and create sort of a menu of options that outline what cause and effect relationships can be established for meeting the community's goals. And then you can see in March, there's a lot of stakeholder outreach, meetings, feedback, public input. We find when we engage the entire community, we get a lot of engagement. For whatever reason, whenever you talk about parking, everybody shows up, and it's frankly, it's really awesome because we get to learn things that we may not be thinking about that are unique to Grand Forks, that are unique to certain parts of town, broad issues, very, very specific issues. And that's probably the most important step in developing a system that works for everybody. By the end of that process, we have a refined plan that we've analyzed, created recommendations, all based within our 13 years of experience in using comparable city data and methods that we've learned do and don't work to solve issues. In May then, we will be actually doing the work to configure and put together the specific plans out of that process and come back to the city for approval with then a potential implementation of a variety of improvements as soon as June. And this timeline is not, not predetermined. It can go faster or slower. The key is that the process is done correctly so that everything rolls out and meets the community's desired outcome. Categorically, there's 6 main areas that we'll focus on in the improvement plan. As you can see from a clockwise perspective, wayfinding and signage, consistency improvements to wayfinding, signage, parking availability, et cetera. Marketing, a lot of that is related to creating interfaces for community stakeholders to use the parking system, buy, manage, update their monthly and annual permits, get information about parking, then, all of van, how does the new hotel make reservations, all of that sort of stuff. Permitting system goes in tow with that. The enforcement procedure that I mentioned earlier is currently performed by the police department. There could be a motivation there to free up community service officer time and have our ambassadors take more and more of that role, which is why it's marked optional. Typically, we end up doing that for most cities over the course of time. There's a focus on safety and security within particularly the multi-level parking structures, so we're going to be evaluating and scoping out advanced security systems for those facilities, particularly for users like students, staff, residents, hotel guests, et cetera. And the last one on that clockwise wheel is that every time we implement a system, we create through our custom data analytics platform a customized dashboard and reporting package that reports specifically the key performance indicators that the City of Grand Forks leadership cares about most. One of the potential implementation upgrades is to replace clunky, kind of legacy, somewhat hard to use parking applications that are currently in place with a new state-of-the-art appless, contactless point-of-sale platform that uses everybody's mobile phones and their camera phone. This is a platform that we've rolled out in a number of communities to extraordinary success. People like it. It gets away from having to try to navigate mechanical meters and punching numbers on a screen. And it's very intuitive. It's a two-step process if you flip to the next page. It's a very simple user interface. So you can see on the screen here, take a picture of the QR code with your smartphone, and in 2 simple steps, folks can register their plate, select form of payment, and they're on their way. No app to download, no account to create. Here's an adaptation of that for a reservation system. We work with all major hotel brands. This one we show a customization for Olivan Hotel for guest vehicle registration that'll be performed by the front desk. Next slide. And what's really cool about this is there's no gates, no mechanical moving parts, and it's all done through establishing virtual zones within a parking garage, surface lot, or on street. And the way that we create these zones are through mobile or fixed place artificial intelligence equipped cameras. No different than the cameras that you're using with the on-street enforcement today. We just use them in a slightly different capacity. So if there's a place for hotel parking, a place for students to park, a place for downtown workers, we actually can create zones within the garages to create different protocol, different policies, and different rates accordingly. That expands into monthly and annual permits, which is all able to be managed online directly by the users. Very efficient, easy account management. If you flip to the next one, I think there's a shot of how to use that. Yep. So in 3 simple steps, kind of like the other one, people sign up for an account for annual, monthly recurring permitting, annual permitting, and it's all plate-based, so we're not sending around hang tags or stickers or anything like that. Some examples of our fixed place and mobile LPR, license plate recognition technology that manages compliance throughout the system. And last but not least, a lot of upgrades in the wayfinding and communication, both digital web presence, community-wide signage upgrade, opportunities for variable message signs, digital media, social media. All of that management comes with our improvement plan. Some examples of some physical static wayfinding signage. So on the left-hand side is an example of what is there currently, and then the example on the right-hand side is just a mock-up of how much we can clean that up. These are just examples. Obviously, we'll develop these and have anything approved by the city staff. But there's a nice, clean, professional-looking municipal branding package. I mentioned we'll create a custom dashboard for real-time data analytics and reporting to report on things as simple as revenue and unit volume to physical occupancy of every single parking stall in the city. And this is an example of, I believe that's the town of Breckenridge, Colorado, that we show real-time data analytics throughout that town based on the key performance indicators that they care about most. I believe that concludes my Reader's Digest condensed version of our overview. We are thrilled to be working with y'all and can't wait to get started.
Thanks, Tony. And Andrea, go ahead.
So then quickly after that presentation, I'll jump into the budget numbers and how this would affect the 5997 parking fund. So on page 3 of the staff report, we gave an overview of the operating budget. Interstate's projected management fee of $147,610. Coupled with their plan for increased revenues between, upgrading the signage and education will get us more compliance with our policies. Consistent enforcement also with that compliance factor would increase revenues. an increase in permit fees. There was a brief blurb in your staff report that we are significantly behind other peer communities in terms of what we're charging for parking. That increased incremental rate to get us up to market will generate enough revenue to essentially come out budget neutral with the overall management contract based on what was approved in the 2023 council adopted budget. So that's the operating. You can see in 24, based on their projections, with the hotel coming online for a full year in 24, we're seeing significant revenues into the positive again for the fund. We also gave an overview of the improvements proposed, separating out the operations from the improvements, as the improvements would be a one-time reinvestment act. We do have some reserves available to pay for the improvements. It would essentially drain that pot of money, but we have the ability to pay for the necessary improvements, make things up to par for the hotel as well as new parking users downtown, keeping that competitive community advantage going. And we'll see the revenue build back up to be able to rebuild those reserves in a relatively short time frame based on their projections and proposals. So with that, I could answer any questions you may have regarding the management contract, but we are looking for approval of the contract subject to city attorney review.
Any questions for Interstate or for Ms. Edwardson?
Here. Mr. Weber?
Yes, President Sandy.
Were we provided a list of references from this organization, and did anyone call any of them?
We did receive a list of references. I did not make personal phone calls. We have heard personal from the Downtown Development Association and their peers in Fargo, think very fondly of Interstate, and so we have heard nothing but good things. They do have 100% retention rate for their communities, and so we do think they're well suited and well qualified.
Great. I would make the recommendation that, and I'm going to move approval, but I'd still like to make one of those phone calls or a couple of them, just for confirmation prior to the council meeting. And with that, I will move approval. Thank you.
Will do.
Microphone, Brett. We have a motion to approve request that between now and next week's meeting that there be some formal calling. Although informally, we've been doing references on Interstate for the last few years or longer. Looking for a second, this motion from Ms. Lunsky. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Mr. Weigel, was that approval?
I voted in the negative.
You voted in the negative. Okay, so we have 5-1 on that. Very good, thanks. With Mr. Weigel opposing. Item 2.14, award bid number 2023-1, water meters and ERTs. Mr. Hanson.
Vice President Weber, members of council, here tonight with our annual water meter and transmitter bid. We bid this annually for new construction meters and then just to replace existing meters and transmitters that fail throughout the year. We received 5 bids for the water meters. The low bidder was Win Waterworks in the amount of $50,000, $513.85 for 190 meters. And on the transmitters, we only received 1 bid. That was Dutton Lyons and Company, the amount of $100,376 for 800 transmitters. And we would just ask you to approve the low bid on both of those.
Looking for a motion or any questions on the bid? Otherwise, a motion from Mr. Kavami and a second from Mr. Vian. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Other items, item 3.1. Mr. Bernstrom, legislative update.
Councilmember Weber, members of council, with their update today, we're about 2 weeks away from crossover at the state legislature, so there's not as much not as many bills in committee, or as when I say in committee, provide an opportunity to provide testimony. So a lot of committee work going on in Bismarck right now, but I'm going to talk about 2 batch of bills. First, as we referenced during several updates, North Dakota PERS, our pension plan. There are 4 bills alive, and the reason I'm bringing this one bill is to keep the pension plan alive, all the others are to kill the pension plan. But what was interesting out of this is on the House side, they have 3 bills, all to kill the pension plan. One of those bills came out of committee with a do pass, the other came out of committee with a do not pass. But when it got to the House floor, they re-referred those do not pass back to committee. And those are going to be heard later this week. I'm not sure what discussion is going on in Bismarck regarding those bills, but they came out of committee with a do not pass, and they got sent back to committee. The committee specifically is the Government and Veterans Affairs Committee. That's on the House side. On the Senate side, it's Senate Bill 2239. That's the bill to keep the pension plan alive. There would be an increase on employee contributions and employer contributions, which as a city, we've been talking with the legislature over several sessions that we're okay with that. That came out of committee with a due pass that's sitting in appropriations right now. Neither one of these are scheduled for a floor vote at this time. The other set of bills I want to talk about are the prairie dog bills. Again, part of our priorities. These were bills that were of our priority. So the bill that got introduced that we thought was frankly an easy one and seemed to have a lot of support for it was 2275. What is prairie dogs? There's a series of buckets, if you will, that get filled with funds as they come into the state. One of those buckets is cities, municipalities and counties. Right? That's the bucket where we get our money from. In front of that bucket was a $400 million bucket for the state savings account, if you will. There's also another bucket at the end for the state savings account. Well, we just asked, can that $400 million bucket, can that just be moved behind the cities or moved to the end? We're not saying not to collect it, but it's more of a timing thing for our budgetary, as we're budgeting projects and stuff with this prairie dog money. That was what the bill was. Well, that bill came out of committee with a do not pass. That caught us by surprise. The North Dakota League of Cities alerted us to that. That has not been scheduled for a floor vote on the Senate yet. Some discussion that's going on in Bismarck is they're saying, all right, we'll leave that state savings account is SIF, Strategic Investment and Infrastructure Fund. Do I have that backwards? SIIF. They're saying, well, we'll leave that SIF bucket there, but what we'll do is we'll take some, increase the excise tax, the highway excise tax, and give more to political subdivisions. The issue with that bill, which is 2239, is it doesn't list cities. It only lists counties and townships. So, good idea. Understand what they're trying to do. There's just some language that needs to change in the bill. North Dakota League of Cities is working with us on that one. And there's one more prairie dog bill. This one is interesting, keeps everything in the same order as the past, just increasing all of the state buckets, they say due to inflation, but not increasing the other buckets. So we have some questions with that. We're like, hey, if you're going to increase them, I get that. But they only increase the state buckets. Other than that, just of note, there are 961 total bills. They're probably down to in the 400s that they still have to address, whether it's passing them, defeating them, however they need to vote on those. Of those 961, we're tracking 91 bills. Of our 91, we have 74 that are still alive. So we continue to take a look at it every day, and I'm open for any questions on those. I know Mr. Phelan has some comments on another set of bills, but I'm open for any other comments.
Mr. Veal.
Do you have anything new on I think it's Senate Bill 2020 for the water?
No, so there's a water bill, these large budgetary bills that, transportation bills, those have constant committee work. I believe they're in committee probably almost every day, specifically that water bill, and you are correct, it is Senate Bill 2020. So far, everything that was originally put in the bill, which we liked, is still in the bill. And Mr. Veen, you know as good as anybody, until it crosses the finish line, it's always a question. But yes, that's probably in committee probably every single day.
And a lot of these are waiting for the projections that'll be coming out in March.
Yes, a lot of these budgetary ones are, yes.
Further questions? Yeah, Ken.
So every session during the legislature, we work with the chamber and frankly the greater Grand Forks area, and it's right, for a better term, the start of the second half. They do, crossover, the end of the first half of the session is the end of next week, and then they reconvene on March 1st, and Grand Forks State, the legislature, is March 2nd and 3rd. That is a Thursday, Friday. Okay, Mr. Phelan.
On Grand Forks Day, John has set up, he's set up on behalf of the city of Grand Forks and the mayor, he set up most of those meetings on that Thursday and Friday. So we have a really great slate ending with the governor and the lieutenant governor. So you should know we're going to be meeting with all the various state agencies that mean a lot to us here in the city of Grand Forks. I just wanted to note, and we also have Keith Lund here from the Grand Forks Region EDC, but there are some concerns about foreign investment in the state of North Dakota, and there's some bills that the state legislature is reviewing, and specifically regarding owning property with certain foreign entities, to include China. You should know that Mr. Lund is working with Cirrus Aircraft. Obviously, they're a major employer with the city of Grand Forks and the state of North Dakota. We are home to their composite center. Their global headquarters is in Duluth, and then they also have a facility in Tennessee and Texas. So obviously, we're a main core of their business, and right now there are some bills that are concerning about whether they could continue to do business in the state of North Dakota and Grand Forks. So we are working with our legislators both in the House and the Senate. Mr. Lund is, and also we're working with Cirrus Aircraft. So you should know that we are working on that, so that at the very least they are not impacted. I think there's a general sense that Cirrus Aircraft has been doing business in the state of North Dakota for some time. We all know that a Chinese company did buy them in and around 2011 after the Great Recession, and have only grown in our community. And so they have a good story, and I think that's coming across in Bismarck. They did go through the CFIUS process, and we're certified to do business in the United States of America. There's ongoing reviews with their national security here in our country, and they're following through on that. So that's the message we're sending to the legislature. I think there's some positive feeling that Cirrus needs to be protected as part of this, as a good standing, very good standing company in our state of North Dakota. But just so you know, everything's in doubt, so we continue to work on that. And currently they have, I think the last time I heard, in and around 430 jobs. They're working in a really aggressive way to add more because they're in an expansion mode, and they've mentioned the number they'd like to get up to 600 workers in Grand Forks. So this is a big deal for the men and women that work at Cirrus Aircraft, because it is about their livelihood of American workers in that plant. So, but nothing should be left for doubt, and I just want you all to know that we will be working in support with that company and supporting them where we can, like we would any other business in the city of Grand Forks.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. And Mr. Bernstrom, great job always tracking those 100+ bills that the city's watching. Nice work. Thanks. Anything for Mr. Bernstrom or Mr. Phelan? Hearing nothing further, item 3.2, Fufeng USA project related update. Mr. Phelan.
Vice President Weber, late today, I just wanted to go, if you look at the agenda this evening, we have a Fufeng update, and we did add several attachments there, and I just want to go through those attachments. So if you go to the particular item of the Fufeng USA project-related update, we have a presentation, a summary presentation that I'm going to go over, but I just wanted to go over some items that I think over time, I think the question is, if we could have some background information of how we move the project forward. I'm just going to go through those items. Item 4.6 was the Fufeng Wet Corn Mill staff report. The City Council did approve that development agreement in February of 2022. The City Council did approve that with one in dissent, and that was Councilmember Dockler dissented on that. Item 3.2 is the determination on annexation, and that occurred in June of 2022. And again, that annexation was approved with one dissent. That was Councilmember Dockler in that case. I have also included, as part of the annexation discussion, there was a lot of discussion regarding that the adjacent area along Highway 81 had been tried to be annexed times before. The latest was in the early 90s 1993 to 1984. I think Councilmember Vian had mentioned that because he was a city engineer, public works director at the time, and would have worked on that. If you look at that, Mr. Brooks, your city planner, did find that letter. And if you look at that letter, the city council got very close to annexing that adjacent area, but did not move forward with. And if you look at that letter, one of the major concerns were the costs of special assessments. And when I go through this summary presentation, that's what the city council really tried to mitigate issues of special assessments, knowing that that was a major issue. Item 2.71, Exhibit D, was when the development agreement was amended. And so that was the first amendment that occurred. The other thing that have come up, and I just mentioned that with the annexation, if you look at Exhibit E, I have two related to Mr. Christian Danielson was in front of you with two spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets were with Fufang and then without Fufang, and so those are those attachments and the various cost shares, and I'll go through that in the overview, but I just wanted to show you those one more time so you can look at the impacted properties and what their specific special assessments were in that case. The other thing that was of concern in advance of annexation of how was that going to impact their property taxes, and so you will see also under item Exhibit F, we have provided the property tax estimates that our former city assessor provided you in advance of final approval, and his estimates. And Tammy Lazur is obviously our new city assessor, so she provided that to me. There was some discussion last time we were here, is that Mr. Hodak did find that some of those property values in that area were lower than we anticipated, and he did provide to you as part of the property tax estimates what he believed the value of those properties were out there. So again, we briefed that in advance to as part of the annexation. Also regarding national security, I just had some documents there. One is from the Department of Air Force, the CFIUS overview. That was shared by Mr. Daniel Burke, who's kind of the guru for the U.S. Air Force on the CFIUS process, and he shared that with Councilmember Osowski and asked that we share that with all of you as community leaders and city council members. So that's attached, and it kind of goes through how the Air Force's role and the DOD's role is in the CFIUS process as we move forward. The other point I want to point out is under Exhibit C, which is a fact sheet, which is an executive order that was signed by President Biden to ensure robust reviews of evolving national security risks by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. That was signed in September to really augment the fact of there's certain 5 economic clusters to include something like AI, quantum computing, semiconductors, and there's some other biotech, that sort of thing, that are included. This executive order is really to have a focus with CFIUS to look at all transactions, to include agricultural investments in our community. I think it's the important note of that is the importance of CFIUS, as noted by Mr. Daniel Burke in their review, and the seriousness and the professionalism that goes into it, to include with our United States Air Force and the Department of Defense. Number 2, I think on the Exhibit C is that President Biden emphasizing the importance of the CFIUS process in looking at foreign investment in our company, so in our country. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 things. The other thing was this counterintelligence report, which is Exhibit B, and that was a document that was shared with us when we met with the FBI, and I think when I was here last week, even Mr. Beauclair shared that with me in advance too. So those are all those documents that I just wanted to highlight in advance to you, and not for any action tonight, but just so that you have them and the public has all those various items. Tonight, we're looking back, but we're moving ahead now as we move forward, and I think as we look at the various documents, I think one of the major lessons learned in this process is the importance of our development agreement. Our development agreement has served us well in this process, whether it's been an environmental issue, an engineering matter, or even national security things, which were things that we did not really have a large focus on. We were really more focused on the environmental and infrastructure parts of this, but it really has served us well, and you should know that very well. I think as part of that development agreement, we always knew this was a historic project, and there was some much positivity. It was going to be the largest investment in our community. However, at the same time, and I knew, and the city administrative team knew, that this was going to be a historically challenging project to deliver. And so therefore, we emphasize this development agreement as an important part of us moving forward as part of the framework. And I've always emphasized this: City Council and the City of Grand Forks did not say yes to the Fufang USA project. You said yes to going through the due diligence process. That's why we almost had a near unanimous vote, 6-1, to move forward with the development agreement. As you recall, Councilmember Mock, she did not vote due to a potential conflict of interest, and Councilmember Dockler at the time was generally against moving forward with the project, but there was unanimous opinion of moving forward. So I think it should be said that we never did say yes to Fufang USA moving forward with the project. We said yes to the due diligence. As part of that due diligence, we also emphasized, similar to, we have to look at Northern Plains nitrogen. We always knew back in 2014 when that project was announced that we would have to look at a similar development agreement, and we should keep in mind the future project that we have with Epitome Energy, and I think you're going to see that here in the coming months. And I think we always knew the Fufang project was going to be challenging. If you look at the Epitome Energy project, that's a project in which I think we can wrap our minds around the infrastructure of that. There's two projects going up in a similar vein in Castleton and in Spiritwood near Jamestown, and we would be the third soybean crushing facility. That's a facility more like a J.R. Simplot company that we have in our community from a service perspective. We always knew that Fufang would be a more challenging project than those, due to all the various infrastructure and environmental capacities on that. I think we should have a special note with the Northern Plains nitrogen. If that is exponentially more complicated and more challenging. That's a $3.5 billion project. And with nitrogen fertilizer plants, oftentimes those come from foreign investments. I think it's going to be the other challenging part of that. Generally, the countries that move forward with fertilizer plants are centered in the Middle East, Russia and China. And so obviously we're going to have some challenges regarding foreign investment in our country, despite us being a net importer of fertilizer and at the end of the line. So I just want to highlight, as we move forward, we do ask you every 6 months to move forward with that letter of intent for water-related activities. But I think all the things that are going on right now regarding foreign investment may have an impact on the NPN project, but we'll continue to move forward. I think number one, the city leadership is indispensable at the beginning, middle, and end of all these projects. We've said it before, projects like the Fufang project or Epitome Energy, they don't move forward with the city or without the city of Grand Forks. We're really ultimately responsible for the infrastructure, shepherding the property tax, and all the loan type subsidization. Cities like Grand Forks have to lead those projects. I think one of the challenges we had with the Fufang project is the Regional Economic Development Corporation helped shepherd the process through the proposals. Certainly, we were an important partner of that. It was a competitive process, but in the end, the city of Grand Forks is going to be responsible for whatever comes your way, and I think that was the important part of the development agreement as we move forward. I think one thing that we learned as part of announcing the Epitome Energy project, again, a different project, we didn't have to go to it through a competitive RFP, but we let the city council know sooner rather than later. So you knew that as part of the announcement. We also informed the two townships that are may be impacted, both Faulkner and Rye. We notified the rural water entity and also our various local governments. So we notified everybody as soon as possible as part of being up front. On the national security front and the geopolitics, I think we all know by now that the issues we have with China and Russia are only ramping up, and none of us in this room or outside of this room know where it's ultimately going to end. So it would have been hard to predict what to do in advance at that point in time. I do want to point out, as Mr. Burks said, you know, the CFIUS, the importance of the CFIUS process. We've been through that process, and as part of that, I also want to note on this counterintelligence report that I attached the importance of what we've done as local leaders. and being aware, situational aware, and developing. And I'm just going to read a few things as part of what we've done. This document was created in July of 2022, which would have been in advance of all the work that we went into on this particular project. But it says local entities should exercise vigilance, conduct due diligence, and ensure transparency, integrity, and accountability are built into the partnership to guard against potential foreign government exploitations. They talk about mitigation, and I think this is where we're really proud of the City Council in passing this development agreement, because right out of our development agreement is really what we should have done in advance, and this is really before we had a framework from our federal government on this. The first bullet is exercise vigilance when engaging with foreign entities, and it says do not sign agreements that run counter to or undermine national U.S. policies. And so I think that's what you did. You moved forward with an agreement that would protect our interests. Number two, it was to know your partners and who you're doing business with. It says contact your local FBI office. Administratively, we did contact the FBI office and got advice that'll go into. Insist on transparency in all agreements. Again, up front and in the public, you approved a development agreement. Share experiences with others to develop best practices. Certainly, we have become a shining example around this country about dealing with foreign investments, to include China. I think that you should also note, whether it's been Northern Plains Nitrogen, we did visit 2 locations regarding Northern Plains Nitrogen, one in Lima, Ohio, the other one in Weaver, Iowa. And one of the real foundational things that we heard is to make sure if you move forward with the fertilizer plant, that it doesn't overwhelm your community, because it is a large investment, and that's one of the issues we heard. We also, as part of our visits, we went down to Fort Dodge, Iowa, regarding the wet corn mill. We also visited Blair, Nebraska, to get a similar sense. And it says maintain enduring connectivity with U.S. authorities, and we did that in our case too, as we move forward. I want to highlight some of the things that a few highlights from our FBI visit, and we did brief the City Council on this, and I think it's worth noting at this particular point in time. Number one is that this was a greenfield investment, and that was something different that the Chinese companies were looking at. Generally, they were much more into acquisitions, and so we had a different case study than many. Generally, the U.S., when we invest in China, are in greenfield investments and are not in acquisitions. Number two is don't paint with a broad brush, and try to be really strategic and selective in the bound of information, and don't paint everything with a broad brush. The message was keep doing what we're doing on the due diligence items, and that our development agreement was serving us well. And I think at this point, they also said, if the FBI takes action, we may never know what happens. That they do their job day to day. I think the one thing that we did hear in that meeting is that this issue with this foreign investment from China, even at that point in time, was likely well past us at that point. So as we move forward. So with that, we're going to go over some of the development agreement items that are were meant to, we certainly wanted to move forward in a positive way, but it was also intended to be there if the project couldn't move forward. So now we're at the secondary response, which is the project's not moving forward, and what does that mean as we move forward, whether it's with the adjacent area and with the Fufang area, and some of this infrastructure is in a combined sort of way. So with that, I'll move forward. This is the annexation map that has been filed with the county, with all the various properties that are platted on this particular map at this point in time. Number two, there were protests that were in front of you. So you can see in red are the property owners and that protested the annexation. The areas in gray are the non-protests in this area. So you can see that some of the complicating factors is that beyond the Fufang specific property, there are many property owners in this area that own large parcels that wanted the annexation. And in fact, this city council, as part of this annexation, approved an annexation agreement. As you recall, Mr. Warkup was here on behalf of SNS, asking for an annexation agreement. And further, as part of that annexation agreement, asking for specific cost shares as part of that. What you did as city council is you did approve an agreement, annexation agreement, but you spread that across all property owners and did not include specifically SNS, but you shared that with all the various property owners. You can see in green are the areas that are already annexed into the city, and you can see along 27th Avenue, you can see where some of those areas are already annexed. And then this is Oscarville over here in this area. And then certain areas in and around the Corinta area that has been noted. We should note our most recent, where we've invested a lot of infrastructures in this Oscarville area. And so you just finished up with paving, and you recall there were some concerns that were filed against you regarding cost shares, and that the project, even despite all the various cost shares that you provided as the city of Grand Forks for the stormwater, the paving, et cetera, that you had property owners that were concerned about and addressed that to you with the costs in this area. The city of Grand Forks, I think, probably in the 1980s, annexed this Oscarville area. Why we never put in infrastructure in that area, I don't know. But over the last several years, you have placed all the infrastructure into that area. When you look at this annexation area that we're going to go over, despite Oscarville getting some really positive and significant cost shares, nothing will ever compare with this Highway 81 adjacent and Fufang area regarding infrastructure, and we'll go over that as setting comparisons. The other thing that came up was the Corinta area, and this city council approved an annexation agreement with the Corintas, and so this yellow area will become annexed when the Corintas no longer own the property. And so that's, in many ways, that's just a matter of time, but they wanted to be protected until they no longer own that property. And so that will come at some point in the future back to you as part of an annexation per that agreement. The Fufang specific area that we are...
We'll take questions at the end.
Is it questions at the end? Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's all right.
These are and you've seen this map before, these are the Fufang specific infrastructure components. The raw water intake right here, and in the raw water intake, we were going to add pumping capacity in the raw water intake. We were going to build a pump station out by the water treatment plant, and then 2 dual lines that would serve Fufang in this greater agribusiness park area. That project will not be moving forward per the development agreement. We will come back. The intake is about 20 years old, so there are some improvements that we will bring back under a normal capital improvement plan in the future. This natural gas pipeline that they were working with the state of North Dakota and the Industrial Commission, Fufang, that would have served the Fufang facility, but would have also provided additional natural gas supply in our community, will not move forward at this point in time. One of the side benefits of working through this particular project, we have discovered that we do not have a large surplus of natural gas supply in our community. And so this project's not moving forward, but as we work on epitome and other future growth items for natural gas, we do have some natural gas concerns that we need to work on in the near term and longer term. Were 3, as part of the traffic study, there were 3 proposed areas to put generally some turn lanes in, and you can see we're working with the DOT, and so you can see along Highway 2, some turn lanes, and then also along Highway 81, turning into 27th Avenue North. I still think with some of these improvements that we should continue to work with the North Dakota DOT and proposing some of those improvements. We heard in advance of the Fufang project that there were traffic concerns with truck traffic and otherwise. So we were going to still work with the North Dakota DOT and to try to push forward with some improvements in this area despite Fufang not moving forward at this point in time. And then you can see on this particular map, and you've seen this map again, is our areas that we're looking to move forward that would jointly share the Highway 81 area and also the Fufang. Projects we are not moving forward with is the industrial pump station that would have served the industrial supply for Fufang down in red, and then it would add a separate force main. That project will not move forward as part of this project. The other part of the project are these dual raw water lines that I showed you around coming from the water treatment plant. These projects will not move forward either. I could see the industrial wastewater pump station moving forward as this project industrial site moves forward with an alternative project. This industrial wastewater pump station makes sense, and the intent was it would also serve entities like J.R. Simplot and other entities along with this site to separate the industrial wastewater from the domestic wastewater. So I could see that coming back, but it would only be under an additional development. What we're proposing as part of this, you can see along the 27th Avenue corridor, and you can see all the various infrastructure we're planning, the sanitary sewer, the water, and the storm. And it's intended for these projects, as we look through the timelines, would be over 3 years. And so the first infrastructure would be put in along 27th, and in the following year, we'd continue to go further north until over a 3-year or 3-phase plan, we would have all the infrastructure in at that point in time. We talked about this last week, but this is the domestic pump station that will not only serve the Highway 81 area, but will also serve this greenfield development here from a sanitary sewer, but from a domestic, not from an industrial perspective. The pond is already sized not only for the Highway 81 area, but it's also sized for the greenfield development. All of this infrastructure that I talk about to serve the Highway 81 area it's what is the reason why some of those annexation areas did not protest. They need that infrastructure in order to grow and develop. And we've gotten some feedback to the city council, just letting you know that those that did not protest still want to move forward with the infrastructure. They need that infrastructure to continue to grow and develop in this particular area, and would encourage you to continue to move forward with that infrastructure that will help serve them. Here's where we broke down the various component parts. The city specific, we're going to continue to work on the phase 1 wastewater treatment plant and phase 2. And then I also mentioned the raw water intake. There are some city needs that as part of this project. The Highway 81 annexation area dedicated, noting all of those particular areas that will serve the Highway 81 area. Certainly we'll have that greenfield development will also serve them also. And then the Fufang USA dedicated, and that's where Mr. Gosted will be working with items that were specifically dedicated to them and what their various cost shares are and funding sources as we move forward. Again, this is the wastewater treatment plant, and so you will see under phase 1 are really renewing some of the existing assets at the existing wastewater treatment plant. And then phase 2 is building a new addition to our wastewater treatment plant, as we have discussed. And so you can see it's under phase 1 and 2. And really what the phase 2 will get sized down. Right now we have it sized as a 5 MGD facility, and Fufang was going to be around 2.5 million gallons per day. And so we are working right now to really refine the cost estimates for the wastewater treatment plant, both phase 1 and 2 with our construction manager at risk. Costs have significantly gone up with industrial projects like this since we started planning this a couple of years ago. So we're really trying to refine the costs. But you should know, for example, instead of having 3 reactors in this area, without Fufang, this hashed area, we will likely move forward with 2 out of the 3 and not the third. So if you look at all these various squares and rectangles, we're looking to right-size this without Fufang being here. It's certainly building in some growth, but not building for large industries that may or may not come here over the next 20 or 30 years. These are the costs that we've spent today. These are city costs that we're looking at in the various cost shares. And so you'll hear a lot about the wastewater treatment plant facility in phase 1 and 2 over the next few years. So you can see that we're planning construction over the 23 to 25 timeframe. And now that Fufang's now moving forward, we're going to right-size the project, right-size the timeline, And you will see that throughout 2023 as we move forward. These are all the Highway 81 annexation area dedicated projects, and you can see the various timeframes. We talked about the water main expansion, what we've spent to date, and that project is planned for over 3 years and over 3 phases. We talked about the domestic pump station and sanitary sewer expansion. Again, that is planned over a 3-year phased period of time. The portion of the stormwater pond, we have started that. That's the one infrastructure component that we did start. And then next summer, we'll start with some of the 24 activities, which is some of the piping outfall activities. One of the concerns that people have is the improvements on 27th Avenue North. And as it's a township road, and we've worked with Faulkner Township over the years regarding generally when Faulkner Township's called, they've called the city and they haven't called the county. And so we made some interim improvements. And so thanks to your Public Works Department, we added some materials, about 20,800 worth, and then we used our in-kind Public Works staff to build up that road. And as we've heard from the adjacent property owners, the road's never been better, even with our interim improvements. I think one of the challenges we're going to have in this area is, though the water activity, all the water infrastructure is not protestable, paving is protestable. And so once we get all the underground infrastructure in this year along 27th, the plan was for next year that we'd come forward and then want to pave 27th Avenue North under an 80-20 cost share. That is protestable, and we'd have to look at who the adjacent property owners as we move forward. But the plan is now to get the underground infrastructure in this construction season. Gives us some time to think through how much improvement we want to do on 27th Avenue North. These are the long list of the Fufang USA dedicated projects that we're working on. The only project that we have moved forward with to construction is the stormwater pond, and we moved forward with the construction of the stormwater pond, and we sized it both for the greenfield development, and we also sized it for the adjacent area. So that's the only one we have under construction. That is a special assessment project as we move forward, but all the remaining items are more under the planning and development and engineering, so we haven't bid any of those. And so as you add up all these dollars, the only construction dollars we have really that relate to Fufang and relate to a special assessment of the stormwater pond, all the rest are all under planning and engineering, and nothing has been constructed at this point in time. Again, on the right-hand side, we have the funding sources, and we've talked a lot about the escrow account. We've talked about the letter of credit and special assessments and related fees as we move forward. So when you look at the city-specific previously planned, that's generally the wastewater treatment plant, both phase 1 and 2, and so we've spent $2.2 million thus far. The Highway 81 annexation area dedicated is the $1.4 million. Most of that is related to the stormwater pond at this point in time. The Fufang USA dedicated is $3.3 million, of which I think about 1.2 to 1.3 of that 3.3 specifically relates to the special assessment in that stormwater pond. So that's what we've expended today. You have a letter of credit of $5 million regarding any activities that we worked on specific and proportional to the Fufang project. With that, I know the question has come up regarding de-annexation, so we've asked Mr. Gossett to provide you a briefing on what that state law says.
Mr. Phelan, before we go to the annexation discussion, would it be okay if we asked you questions now?
Please.
Is that all right? Anyone have questions for Mr. Phelan?
Maybe one thing I should have done on these, as I go through the annexation area, just so you know, when I talked about this extraordinary cost share the city provided, I'll just go through these areas. The water main expansion, 0% of that is going to get assessed to the Highway 81 annexation area. So the plan is, working with the State Water Commission, that they'll provide a 60% cost share, and the city of Grand Forks will pick up the remaining 40% cost share. For the wastewater pump station, the city of Grand Forks, in any development, we generally pay for the domestic pump station. So in this case, the city of Grand Forks is going to pay for the pump station. Generally, the sanitary sewer expansion is special assessed. In this case, the city council agreed not to special assess that to the Highway 81 area. The sanitary sewer will be assessed to the Fufang Greenfield area, but will not be expanded. So the water main and the sanitary sewer, there's no special assessments to the adjacent Highway 81 area. The stormwater pond and...
These are all infrastructure improvements that any other property owner in Grand Forks has paid special assessments on that would be covered for these.
Yeah, generally the sanitary sewer collection and the water main, you would see a special assessment. In this case, you do not. On the stormwater, we have the with and without Fufang right now. With Fufang, there was not going to be special assessment. Without, there was going to be a 50% cost share. The reason why we came up with the 50% cost share, if you look at the adjacent Oscarville area, the city of Grand Forks approved a 50% cost share on that stormwater pond that we built out in that area to serve the area, along with the associated pump station. So that's where that 50% cost share came in. The other part is Fufang is still being assessed their regular cost share on the stormwater pond too, and so that's attached to their property.
They're the only property owner in the
Yes.
area being assessed. Thanks.
The 27th Avenue paving, that was intended to be set up as an 80-20 split, so it'd be 80% city cost share and then 20% assessed. The other thing we did is to help the benefiting property owners is that not only did we include the 80-20 with the paving, but we also include 80-20 cost share for the storm sewer that has to go in with a street, and to even make it more financially viable for the adjacent property owners and make it better. And so a lot of times, stormwater infrastructure related to streets is assessed at a higher rate. In this case, we just included it as part of the street. Highway 81 improvements in the area, we still, I think, some may make sense as we move forward, so we're still going to consider that. And then we've already gone forward, and as I noted, you should know that's very much appreciated by those property owners, the improvements we've already made in that particular area. I should also note and I said, working with our congressional delegation, working with our governor's office, their firm commitment is to help support this is an industrial site for agribusiness, and they believe in that. This was the wrong investment in their opinion, but they're going to help us focus on a U.S. or allied nation investment. And so I think we should really focus on the fact that something is going to go into that area. It's likely to be an agribusiness. And the great point right now is we have our state and our national leaders that are really going to help support us move forward with further development in there, and they've made that commitment to us. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Quickly, I'll ask one now. You've mentioned underground infrastructure will go in, but possibly we won't pave. That helps us to avoid the Oscarville mistake of letting an area that we've annexed go with that infrastructure for years.
Yeah. Right. I think some of the property owners out there have been looking forward that street would get paved.
Right.
The city would pay that 80% because it's been a real trying roadway in that area, that township road. And so I think they're really encouraging for us to move forward. However, that is something that can be processed by the benefiting property owners.
Mr. Veen.
If we could we go back to the previous one on the annexation? No, the one I think you just had up. No, the one with all the numbers. There. Todd, you identified a lot of the different infrastructure projects here, and I think you did what I was going to ask you about, was to identify the costs that are associated with each one of these. I think early on you did have a spreadsheet that kind of tried to define all of that. Mm-hmm. Have you updated that spreadsheet to kind of show what those costs are and where the money's coming from?
Sure. Was that the one that Mr. Danielson used to come up with?
Yeah, I think that was.
What we attached is what was part of the approval process, I guess, middle part of 2022. We're gonna plug new numbers in there with the actual bids. There are still some more numbers. Mr. Danielson's going to work on that. So we just attached in today's agenda what we had already presented, but they're working on getting the final numbers in there, the bid items that are
Yeah.
already in there.
I think there's a story to be told there, and I just want to make sure that we have that and can look at that. I know there was some discrepancy because it was changing, and now to get it to a point where we have it a little bit more accurate compared to what we think it's going to be. Obviously, 27th Avenue North is an unknown. One of my basic questions, if we didn't do that now, I can see getting the storm in because you can get the drainage. Do we have to do this now, or would there be a better timing, and could that money be better utilized someplace else if we're paying the 80% versus putting into this street?
Council Vice President Weber and Council Member Vian. I think the answer is yes, in the sense of, yeah, there's probably better places where we could put the money immediately, and we have more transportation needs than we have funds. But this was a priority project to move forward with, so I think we'll look at the priority and bring that back to you. And I think we have some time. If we can get the water sewer in there this summer, and then we can come back to really right size. And thanks to Sharon Lips and the Public Works team, they've done a bang-up job improving that road. And maybe part of it is what can we do that's more of an interim strategy without having to go through the full paving of that section, because it was going to be a significant investment for us. And there are some alternative places we could invest further infrastructure funds.
And what about the other intersection improvements that were the DOT ones? Are those, would they continue possibly too at this time?
I think we should. I think what we heard in our meetings and with some of the trucking companies, I'll state specifically SNS, with all the growth that we've seen with the North Dakota Mill and Elevator, I think the major concern up there was that intersection at 27th and Highway 81. And so I think we're going to continue to work with the North Dakota DOT, and let's see if we can make some of those improvements in advance. It sounds like when we had conversations with those folks up there, those are improvements they've wanted made in advance of that. So I think we'll continue to do that. We'll just let the DOT, I think they were willing to push up some of the schedule and reallocate funds to us. I think we can say right now is time is, it's not like they have to do it in the next year or two, and maybe they can help it phase in over a longer period of time. But I think we should follow up and make some of those improvements in advance.
And then, was there any loss of state funds like Water Commission funding or anything for the project with the loss of Fuvon?
I think I did have conversations with the State Water Commission staff. On the drinking water side, I talked about that water main to serve both drinking and potable or in fire protection up there. They've committed to that. We have an agreement right now for engineering for the 60%, and obviously we hope that it goes from engineering to construction where we get 60% cost share. They feel positive that, you know, that's an appropriate water supply project for a municipal entity like us. I think one of the questions we have is, since we're not moving forward with the raw water supply, we did have a design agreement that provided a 60% cost share, and then if the project were to move forward, we'd have to come back to the State Water Commission and ask for 60% cost share on the construction. We'll have to follow. We have not billed the state of North Dakota for any of that at this point in time. We will ask for the 60% cost share, but if not, it's 100% cost share, and then that would lead into Mr. Gosted. And one of the things in the agreement, if we said we'd make good faith efforts to get state cost shares, but if we didn't get the cost share, we would have to, it would just increase their costs as part of the infrastructure. And so that's kind of how we would allocate the funds if we don't get any from the state.
Okay. The natural gas, is there any chance that we would either, well, the one that's going to come from the Bakken, is that any chance of getting that back here regardless of what happens with Fufang?
Vice President Weber and Councilmember Veen, I think yes. And what they're working on this session, they're asking companies like WBI, which is a subsidiary of Montana Dakota Utilities, of what would it take for the state to subsidize them to make that natural gas pipeline come from the Bakken. And I think that's what's going on right now. Is the state had committed up to $300 million over 2 sessions to make it happen. And what they've asked for these private companies is, what does the number need to be, especially with the cost escalations that they had in construction. So I think they're working through that, of what would it take. The other thing the private companies have said is they need an end user. They need a significant end user to make it a worthwhile venture for them. They need a nitrogen fertilizer plant. They need something like that to really make it cost effective, or the state of North Dakota is really going to have to upfront invest more into making that pipeline happen. We have talked to Epitome Energy, and in this case, they're working directly with XL Energy. They've been provided, subject to all the final engineering, that they should have enough natural gas supply to serve their project. But that's not finalized yet, but that's under engineering. We certainly hope that XL has enough capacity, but if not, we're kind of back to that east to west from One Oak to get us more natural gas supply. And I think our concern is not only for industry, but we want to make sure we have enough natural gas supply for existing residents, commercial entities, but also future growth in our community.
Well, and the redundancy.
And the redundancy. And
That's probably-
it shows that, natural gas is a weak link, even for communities like Grand Forks who've taken it for granted. The point is, we shouldn't take it for granted.
On the wastewater treatment, we kind of changed treatment processes, didn't we, in the midst of that? That's still consistent, that we would keep the new treatment process, we'll say, versus what we currently have?
Yeah. Council Member Bean, that's a very good question. If you recall, when we were looking at adding capacity, there's two ways we could do it. We have 4 reactors over here, so you got 3 here and there's 1 over here. One thing we could do, we could add reactors, like 1 or 2 more reactors in this area. The other thought we had, specifically for working with industry, is there were some technology and infrastructure you could put inside these reactors that would add capacity. But in working through our construction management, it was found that, adding more into these reactors were some real concerns after 20 years with structural integrity and all those things. So we moved off of adding more things into those reactors just because of concern about constructability. The other thing that came along with all the issues that the pandemic has brought is supply chain issues, and a lot of the manufactured items that would go into these reactors have significantly increased in cost since the pandemic. So we've asked that question, and we'll have more discussions with U.S. City Council, but it seems like this bioreactor right here is the best long-term solution for Grand Forks, not only for domestic and commercial, just because we have so much industry in our community now and into the future, that this was the most robust option that we had to serve the community in the future, with keeping this facility going over in this part. So really, this part is really the expansion area of us. Almost think about our water treatment plant. We have a conventional side of the plant, and then we have this membrane RO part of the plant, so it's kind of a 50-50. To some degree, we're going to have that. We're going to have the old plant that operates a certain way, and then we're going to have the newer plant that operates a certain way, but they all work in a synergistic perspective.
I know we speeded up, I guess, the process of the wastewater with Fufeng. Are we continuing on the same pace, or will we go back to our original timeline?
Yep. Councilmember Bean, another good question. We always told Fufeng back in the day is that we'll do our good faith effort to try to move forward as quickly and as wisely as possible, but we were going to control the schedule. They weren't going to control the schedule. I think in this case, we're back to more of a normative schedule, and I think we would have been that whether Fufeng moved forward or not, because Fufeng, obviously there's a lot of things that happened in between where it slowed down too. So we intended, our construction manager at risk is PKG. They really wanted to try to start putting a foundation where where some of these rectangles and squares are. That didn't happen. Obviously, there were so many unknowns is that we couldn't move forward this winter with driving piles. I suspect what their next goal would be, if they could start driving piles this coming fall, would be their goal. And so that's kind of what we're targeting, that we would start construction, the foundation in this area this fall would be the earliest we'd be in there.
So will the funding request be coming back to us to do that, and then at a date certain coming up?
Yes, it will. Right now, the North Dakota Industrial Commission approved a Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for our wastewater treatment plant. I think it's on the order of $50 million they've set aside. So that's why the importance of our estimates. My guess is right now with cost escalations, it's going to be more than that. We're going to need more funds from the state of North Dakota for low-interest, long-term financing. That's the important part of us kind of bringing this back to you, concurring, because I think likely we'll have to ask for additional funds from the state of North Dakota.
Sure. Do you have one that just has the water main on?
Let's see here. All I have right now, I think we have, this is probably the best thing that we
Sure.
have.
So if I could ask a couple questions on that. The rural water line is been replaced, is that right? Or being replaced? Could you talk about that?
We did that. That's one of the costs we have, is that as you recall, for whatever reason, Agassiz Rural Water went right down the middle of the site here. And so what we did is that we moved that line adjacent to this area, so that's where we moved the line. Maybe I can just look at what that costs. Let's see, I think it was about $50,000 to do that, something like that. But that's in this category right here, Mr. Vian. When you look at miscellaneous for Fufang, you have attorney fees and Agassiz water users line relocation. That's in this line item right here.
Okay, so going back to that, the plan sheet you just had up there, the future lines then on Gateway, or 81 North, and whatever the other north-south line is there, that will be forthcoming yet, right?
It will, and what you approved, I think at the last council meeting, you approved this initial phase one, which is putting the water line along 27th. The reason why we did that, obviously, we're going to move to the north under 3 phases, but the other part was some of the SNS transport areas as part of that annexation agreement. There was a goal for them to get water, both for drinking and, more importantly, in their case, for fire protection water. And that's why we're really trying to move forward with that so that we can serve them in their future expansions.
Yeah, because the fire protection will be an issue in this area.
I mean, the other interest we have our great fire department that is already providing first response and fire protection in this area. And as Mr. Lorenz was here, you know, we got a partnership with the East Grand Forks and their pumper truck, and he kind of went through what we're going to do in the interim. So really, for the city of Grand Forks, we want to get water lines in there that are appropriately sized so that we can, you know, protect the properties. We can have appropriate infrastructure for our fire department as we've committed in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Despite disagreements about whether Fufang would have been a net benefit for the community or not, and clearly there were some who thought it would have been disastrous for us, the project nonetheless would have been beneficial in a variety of ways, including economic growth, and the gas capacity. So this has affected not just our community, but those communities all along the Highway 2 corridor are less likely now, and the Bakken is going to be less able to pump oil because of the limit on gas capacity without that pipeline. So that's all unfortunate. We are scaling back the wastewater treatment facility plant, but are we doing so in a way that can accommodate future growth when needed? You had those 3 reactors. We're not going to develop the 3rd. Are we set to be able to develop that when the need arises?
Council Vice President Weber, I think when we add the 2.5 million gallons per day instead of the 5, I think that's a significant increase, and certainly it'll be infrastructure that'll serve our normal growth, whether that's residential, commercial, industrial. If we get a large industry that's either going to expand in Grand Forks or a new one, I think we will react similar to what we did with Fufang. If we need to expand another basin, we'll have time to do that in advance. And so we don't sink a lot of funds into excess infrastructure that we may not use for the next 20 years.
Good, that's sound. One last comment and then we'll move to the annexation issue. Ultimately, as you've so well described, development agreements both allow us and force us to steer clear of political pressure. One way or the other, political pressure to go forward with the development or political pressure to kill the development. Development agreements, to the greatest degree possible, help us to make objective, data-based decisions about major development projects. Approving major projects without due diligence would be irresponsible. But if we simply turned away from potentially beneficial economic development opportunities, that we would not be serving the best interests of our taxpayers either. So what we've done is we've engaged a development agreement process, and according to our own process, not because of political pressure, according to our own process, when matters arose, we ended that. But importantly, we now have a wealth of experience with development agreements that will serve us well when future projects come to our community.
Yep.
Thanks.
I think that's well said. I think without the development agreement, you would have gotten a letter from the United States Air Force, and only the lever of the development agreement was in place at the local level to stop the project. It's important to note. And, you know, some of the feedback that we've gotten from our consultants inside the Pentagon is that they really have appreciated not only the mayor, but the city council for moving swiftly at their request per the development agreement. And so that's the feedback that we've gotten from our senior officials. And you should all know that people in Washington understand our firm appreciation and patriotism for the Grand Forks Air Force Base, and they know what kind of people we are here. And that's why you're seeing some of the growth on the base, whether it's the Test Resource Management Center with Mr. Rumford, whether it's Space Development Agency with Dr. Tournier, and a future ISR mission that's upcoming. They understand Grand Forks in this region are all about national security and patriotism and our Grand Forks Air Force Base.
I think future developers have witnessed and have appreciated that we went through the process we did and did not succumb to political pressure. Ultimately, it was the development agreement that ended this project. Thanks, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Gaustad.
Yeah, members of the committee, I'll be brief because there was questions last week about de-annexation. There's a statute, it's North Dakota Century Code 40-51.2-04 that deals with exclusion by petition of owners and electors. What that statute provides is that a petition can be submitted. It has to be submitted by not less than 3/4 of qualified electors in the area proposed to be de-annexed. It also has to be signed by owners of not less than 3/4 of the assessed value in the area to be de-annexed. However, this statute goes on to say that it only applies to lands that have not been platted under subdivision platting statutes, which are 40-50.1-01 through subsection 17, or it's section 570239, which deal with, those are auditor lots where you've got an odd meets and bounds description. Somebody can file in an auditor's lot to make it easier for legal descriptions. It also, statute provides that this petition or these lands the statute doesn't have application where there's no, as long as there's no municipal improvements that have been made or constructed within the area to be de-annexed or adjacent to it. Ultimately, even assuming the exclusions under the statute don't apply, any decision to de-annex is in the discretion of the city council. It does require, if the petition would come forward and you meet the criteria and it doesn't fall within the exclusions, there would have to be, again, publication and notice to those within the de-annexation area for a hearing. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions with respect to the de-annexation process by this petition, by the statute.
Any questions for Mr. Gaustad? Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gaustad. At this time, City Council member discussion matters. Is Mr. Weigel still with us? Mr. Weigel, anything to add at this time? Ms. Lunsky? Mr. Kavami?
Just wanted to thank everyone for their concern on my absence last week. I was on family vacation. I appreciate everybody's concern. I did contact the Herald today when I turned my phone back on when I came back into work. Thank you.
Mr. Vian?
I had a couple of additional questions having to do with the Fufang issue and would like to maybe move them forward a little bit, if you don't mind. What I found very interesting about this whole process is probably what worked well and what didn't work well. I think as we've laid out, there's things in the annexation agreement that were well done. And I believe there are some things in there that I don't know was entirely inclusive. I think for me it was a huge learning experience for how we might move forward, especially with the future ones. It's easy to do some of the ones that are really technical. It's some of those that may have a bearing beyond that that somehow I think need to be put in there. And through this process, one of the things that dawned on me, again, like everything, is location, location, location. And oftentimes when we looked at this location and we look at our zoning that we have and land use planning, we've looked at where we want industry, where we want residential. We go through that process. But this brought out a little bit for me as I looked at what Fargo did when they had like Thorolson, who looked at putting the plant further away from town, and Jamestown, who uses spirit wood. I think it's worth at least thinking about when we have this type of heavy industry, could it be moved further away from major population centers for a long-term type of park? The dilemma with that is access to utilities and taxation. I mean, the advantage to having it closer is because of that, right? The problem is location isn't always that in the right place. And at least I was talking to one developer who said in other places within the state, they've looked at some type of agreement between cities and counties, so it isn't just one or the other, that you both kind of work and benefit on that. I throw that out as just a discussion point if there were some opportunity to do that. We'd keep the property we have now. It would still remain industrial, don't get me wrong, but could it be better utilized for different light industry instead of heavy industry? I thought that was one of the thoughts I had. The other one I learned a little bit about recently here is I think it's through maybe the North Dakota Industrial Commission doing is it a REMI study? Did we ever have one of those done here for us with Fufang?
I'm going to have Keith Lund come up. I think on the siting, Grand Forks, it's challenging to find, to your first question, number one, we have an airport to the west of us. We have a Grand Forks Air Force Base to the west of us.
Yeah.
On industry going south of Grand Forks is challenging. We have Minnesota to the east. And so, and like you said, our heavy infrastructure is located north of our community. And so realistically, to find a Spirit Wood or a Castleton, it's more challenging in Grand Forks than it would be in others because we're just not set up. It's hard to undo history at this point of where things were located.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think it is challenging. I think I don't know how far north you could go. I just thought it would be worth a look at. That wouldn't take the industry necessarily away from us, but the location may not be as adversarial as what we currently have as you look at something like that.
Just because one of our theories, I can bring up some old days of the solid waste landfill. So I inherited a process in which there was a objective process that located the landfill north of Manville, and guess what we figured out? They didn't want it north of Manville.
No.
Guess where it ended up? In our area. And so that was tough.
I was around.
That's a life experience I don't want to go through again. Maybe similar to this Fufang experience. And so I wouldn't allow that to any of my successors to want to have to go through that process again, because where we go, it's not going to be quite the right place.
Yet it's worked in other locations.
Yeah.
So.
But obviously, I think I'd ask Mr. Lund what he does with the Department of Commerce regarding the economic development parts.
Good evening, Mr. Lund.
Good evening, Vice President Weber, Mr. Bean. We did do a REMI analysis, or we asked the state to do one. So REMI is Regional Economic Modeling, and I don't recall what the I stands for. It's an institute actually it might actually be. There are several other programs that you can use too, and when we talked about 233 direct jobs and the salaries that the company anticipated, that the 233 came from the company, the average salary came from the prevailing wage in the industry for those types of jobs. But if you recall, we also talked about 525 additional indirect and induced jobs, and that came through that study and what those salaries will be. Those types of models actually try to anticipate or understand the different types of trades and different types of service agencies that you have in your service companies that you have in your community, trades and transportation and the like, and try to estimate what type of that benefit will accrue as a result of local procurement and what has to be imported from other parts of the state. So a lot of those numbers were derived from that analysis. And so Praxis Strategy Groups, you're all familiar with them. They use a different model, and the name of that is escaping right now. But those are important. The first one I recall doing is when J.R. Simplot, back probably 15 years ago now, was considering $100 million worth of investment. And one of the ways you can look at that is going forward, and one of the ways you can look at is if you take those jobs away, and what impact does a company have on your community, so you can look at it forward-looking, or if that business did not exist. Hope that answered your question, Mr. Bean.
No, that did. I think it's one of the tools that would be able to do, and I think maybe I asked you for some of that information months ago or whatever it is. I didn't realize it was from this model, and I don't know how accurate this model is, but it seems to be used a lot here in the state of North Dakota.
Well, many development agencies, Vice President Weber, Mr. Bean, most economic development organizations will use the state North Dakota Department of Commerce as a resource, and they exclusively use REMI. We are fortunate to have a Praxis Strategy Group in our community, so we can use another model and balance that, or decide to exclusively look at that. They're all estimates. They may be low, they may be high in different areas within that analysis, because they do try to estimate, again, the region's capacity to support different types of developments and how much of that will accrue and be served locally, and how much of that will serve, how many of those services will need to be brought in from outside the state. Yep. And the information that we provided, there were one or two pagers that you saw throughout the process. That most of that information was informed by the REMI process, the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
If I could, and maybe for you, Mr. Phelan, you and I have had an ongoing discussion going about water availability and raw water. I welcome that, continue that discussion. No, not just because we don't have this, but I think that's prudent for the future. Anyway, I welcome the chance to be able to carry that forward, either publicly or privately as needed. I think it's an important issue. So,
Council Vice President Weber and Council Member Bean, I think you're going to see that soon, because we're in the midst of a legislative session. We anticipate getting a large sum of money from the state of North Dakota that we'll have to match at 25%. And so I think we're going to have discussions, and then we're going to end up asking you to sign a development agreement regarding the project. I think we're calling it a project partnership agreement, but a development agreement. So that'll come before you sooner rather than later. And I think we should, I think for the next project, I don't know if when another project's going to come by that wants raw water and 6 million gallons of it, but it probably won't happen anytime soon. But I think it also emphasizes the importance of, I agree with Mr. Vian, the importance of the Red River Valley Water Supply Project for our long-term insurance policy, and just as important for our long-term growth and industrial growth in that area, especially if we're going to bring natural gas supply down this Highway 2 corridor. We're going to need water in the Red River Valley to support these industries.
okay. Yeah, thank you. That, especially the Red River Valley Water Supply, I think we're really well aligned. What that means, the funding is going to be the issue, and this legislative session was going to be critical, and that's why I asked John a little bit about latest on the bill there. There's still a ways to go in that. Maybe just a couple of other quick things. I don't know if we can answer these entirely today. I brought up earlier on, a month ago or less, about some of my risks that I was concerned about. One of them was potentially the loss of the Air Force Base and what that would mean. And I know there's been some BRIC discussions in one of those that came back to me. Is there a plan for how to move forward with relationships here that would be Is that something I see a lot happening through BRIC, but I would think the city would be involved? What's the next steps there?
Sure. Council Vice President Weber and Councilmember Veen, we're working on our base relations all the time, and I think that's why you see much of the success that we've had. And this community we were BRAC back in 2005, and we were the R in BRAC, which is realignment. And we are the success story of a base being realigned, and not only surviving, but starting to thrive now. And certainly we're working with Senator Hoeven on appropriations for defense, and certainly Senator Kramer. We do go annual meetings with the Pentagon. The last time we were there were right after we approved the development agreement, which is in March of 2022. And when we were inside the Pentagon, we talked to Dr. Tournier and Mr. Rumford, and who would have known all the great things that were going to come. They were, again, those two gentlemen also were at the, virtually and in person, were at the chamber event. And so they have lots of warm feelings for Grand Forks and this community, and they only see great things. We also, at that same meeting, met with several 3- and 4-star generals that have their hands in ISR missions and related to Grand Forks. And so we will do that again, and we'll provide updates. We do have base consultants. We asked our base consultants, one being General Deptula, to follow up to make sure that they're well aware of what we've done here recently with the city of Grand Forks. And that's one of the feedback when I mentioned that they were appreciative of the fast action once they got the message from the United States Air Force and utilized. So they're very appreciative of what the city council did, and they're very appreciative of what the mayor did, and they're very appreciative of working through that development agreement. That's the feedback we got. So we will be making another trip to the Pentagon. The other trip we generally make is to Air Combat Command, and our base is an Air Combat Command base, and so their headquarters is in Langley, Virginia, and generally we make a trip out there too. So we will do that, and we'll provide a positive message. And we're working on base relations on an ongoing basis, currently with Colonel Curry. Colonel Curry will be replaced by, I'm sure, another great colonel that will be commander of the Grand Forks Air Force Base in the area command. And that we anticipate this summer. So we'll make sure that we do all the right things as we move forward and tell our story. So we're on that, and whether it's the community, and we have a great BRIC committee made up of many different individuals. We have several consultants too, but we're going to work that ongoing to get our message out there.
Yeah, if you'd please keep us informed. Yes. I was notified that there seemed to be a breach of the trust after this, and I guess, the value of the air base is so critical to us, yes. and it's something it's paramount, and I think that has to be a priority too.
Just so everyone knows, there was a BRIC meeting. We had a base consultant that said that. I don't agree with that. That's why I followed up with General Deptula to follow up at senior levels in the Pentagon to provide our message of what we did. And the feedback that I got was, thank you for the swift action, is what I got. And we understand. And much appreciation for the Grand Forks Air Force Base and the Grand Forks community is the feedback that I got.
Okay, no, that's the follow-up I guess I'm looking for and hoping is obviously there. It's really critical to us. The last one I had that was to maybe talk a little bit about one of the statements that have been made relative to the Chinese students and professors at UND. I know President Armacost has talked about that. Is there anything new that needs to be said or could be done?
I know Vice President Weber has also had communications. I will say this, as part of the discussion with Cirrus Aircraft, that same bill that mentions, foreign adversaries, and with companies like Cirrus Aircraft, and certainly we're working down, and as part of one of those bills, it was to exclude companies that have gone through CFIUS, companies that already have a national security plan. But there was also in that same bill, and I think that now has gotten edited out, it was also going to include individuals. And so I think it's important to note that we raised that as a concern, as an issue, because in the original drafting of that bill, it would have included companies, corporations, and it would also have included individuals, and it would have prevented them from owning property in the state of North Dakota. And I think there's more we can do, and maybe I could defer maybe to Vice President Weber. I know you've had some conversations too.
President Armacost's reputation across the state is secure. He's well-respected. I don't think there's any concern there right now. The concern with our legislature is protecting Cirrus and the jobs in our community right now.
And my statement wasn't about the legislature, it's about here in Grand Forks. Any comments that was made that Armacost, I know, met with the mayor and discussed that on the Chinese and students and staff. I guess I want to make sure everybody feels welcome, and if there's anything more that the city council could do, if we have some ideas, I think we should be on top of that.
We have great relationship with the university and with President Armacost and regular communication there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, motion to adjourn. Motion from Mr. Kafami, second from Ms. Lunsky. All in favor? Oh, don't wait. We haven't adjourned yet. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Meeting's adjourned. Good night. Thanks.